And we are recording on Monday, September 18th, 2023 at 3:17 p.m. Eastern Time with Dr. Robert Seik, who's been on here once before. I'm realizing now, looking at the camera, I need a haircut. Also, completely unrelated and really not important, but I got a new microphone boom, and this one, Gator Frameworks, has shit the bed in more ways I care to describe, and I'm now thinking as I'm saying this, maybe I need to not say whatever I was about to say for fear of, I don't know, is that slander, liable? Maybe I don't need to get into a legal battle with a microphone boom company. So never mind. I'll just completely pivot from that. Dr. Seek, how are you doing?
I'm good. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. So last time you came on, we talked about, really kind of the entrenched power structure that, and I think one way to describe it for me at least is it it's more palatable when you like put a date on it and you look back and you find Kennedy and you go, that's when it started. But it's less satisfying, more intimidating, and more intellectually intimidating because it's not a simple date when you start to go back and realize, like all things, it didn't just start, that there is this interweaving kind of monster that you can go back to Eisenhower. You can go back to Smedley Butler. And as I told you, right now I'm reading a book about Woodrow Wilson. And you're just looking back at like the machines in power then and him setting up the Federal Reserve and World War One breaking out. And you're watching this whole thing happen, and it's almost peace inducing because you realize it's so much bigger than you and you're never going to figure it out. But it's also, in a bad way, it's awesome. And in the definition of the word awesome, it's kind of breathtaking when you realize the scope and magnitude of whatever you want to call it, the Illuminati, New World Order, Federal Reserve, military industrial. It's got a million different names. It's that unelected power structure that controls all the world's resources and militaries. But I'm going to continue to post the live link. Dr. C, could you maybe add your comments on that and kind of, I guess, our similar interest in it?
When I was on your show last time, it's always good. I mean, it's a celebration to find somebody who's like-minded because I was just having a chat with my across the street neighbor yesterday, right? I mean, we're texting. We're talking about stuff that's going on in Las Vegas. You see, there's a big cyber attack at the MGM, and one of my neighbors, down the street is a cybersecurity guy who actually works for the military. He's former military, and he's laughing because he said, "Look, what it is just some dumb system administrator let a password out, and now look, there's millions of dollars lost per day in MGM." And just chatting about what's going on in the world with my across the street neighbor and telling him things. He's like, "Well, what else out there that we need to be worried about?" I said, "Did you know about smart dust? Did you know about allegations with the hydrogel vaccine, a certain frequency exposure, and there could be a payload delivered from the hydrogel?" And it's like, when I start to talk and thinking that, okay, my relatively awake neighbors should like be there, like, oh, what is that stuff, right? And we stopped the conversation because what you pointed to, a lot of people don't realize yet that there is an enemy, that we are at war. We have been at war for a long time, meaning sovereign civilizations have been at war. It's been a steady march to centralize power and take over governments. So taking that step back, like you said, well, how can we look at some other nations in the centralization of power? Well, anywhere communism has made its way, I mean, that's the best power structure for the few elite. Hey, you've got your Politburo and your proletariat, and you have a small group of people that control everybody else. And what did Stalin say? I care not about people's vote. I care who counts the votes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't get, and Bolshevik revolution after revolution and splitting countries, right? We did that. We got North South Korea. We had North South Vietnam. Tried to do that in the United States. And Lincoln And there's some debates about Lincoln. Was Lincoln a Marxist or was he not? And I don't know what's true about that, but Lincoln did not want the country split, and that was the attempt. So you mentioned Woodrow Wilson, and I have to be honest, I haven't really studied Woodrow Wilson in depth. I could just give you the broad brushstrokes, but look at the most nefarious, largest controlling entity that this country has ever known, the Federal Reserve Bank. You've heard many people say it's a private bank. It's just as federal as Federal Express,
Yeah.
meaning it's not,
Yeah.
right? They just gave it a kitschy name. So, the Federal Reserve Act was what, 1913? And when did World War I break out?
1914.
Because when you make the money, when you just print it, you can drive the war machine. And when you drive the war machine, what does your war machine do? Take control of land and resources. So that's just the beginning with Woodrow Wilson. So my question to you, based on what you've studied so far, was Wilson part of this game, this club, or was he kind of thrust into it?
I don't think so. And this is what makes it even less satisfying. I didn't know shit about him ever. I mean, it's like Woodrow Wilson, League of Nations, World War I, the end. That's all. Yeah, whatever. That's all you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always easy to look back and be like, oh, it's just this, rich dude in a Model T, and you're like, he started the Federal Reserve, he must be evil the end. But the more I'm reading about him, it's almost it's the end of Scooby-Doo, and you're pulling the mask off, and you're like, all right, so it wasn't Kennedy, it wasn't. Like I said, I hate this microphone boom. I can't twist this thing to me. All right. It's like you pull the mask off, you go, it wasn't Kennedy, it wasn't Eisenhower, and just in terms of finding the genesis of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
You keep going back, you go, okay, well, it wasn't Eisenhower, 30 years before him, Smedley Butler, it must have been him. And you go, no, I don't think that's word. And you go back, you go, finally, Woodrow. We got him, we pulled the mask off, and would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids. I'm not finished with the book, but I'm at like World War I's broken out now. Lusitania's been sank. And maybe I'm just a sucker. He seems like a pretty decent dude, very smart guy, definitely like silver spoon. He was either the dean or like the president of Princeton. I mean, homie he wasn't like, in the coal mines with other kids. He was, he was a wealthy guy, very flowery writing. And the more you learn about him, like very close connected to God, very idealistic. It doesn't sound like a bad person, but you don't get any vibe of like you read about the Dulles brothers or like James G. Zangleton. You read about any of these guys, and you're like, you just get a hint. Watch an interview with them, you're like, these guys are they'll cut your throat in your sleep. Reading about Woodrow Wilson, he kind of just seems like a romantic, idyllic, he's World War I is breaking out as his wife is dying, and it's like, and on one hand, it's almost kind of, you almost kind of feel bad. You're like, oh fuck, I didn't know. He's sitting there and he's like, it's like my partner, like the only person that still gives me butterflies in my chest after 30 years of marriage. Like he's writing letters to like the prime ministers and leaders of Europe, saying let's not go to war with one hand, and he's holding his wife's hand, his dying hand. He's holding her hand as she's dying with his left hand. And you're like, oh, well, it's so easy to be like, he's behind World War I. And then you read about the Federal Reserve, and it was his entire thing was like his signing moment was like, this is brilliant. We're putting, I think his exact words almost sound like Trump's inaugural speech. He's like, we're putting power back into the hands of you, the people. And he's going on and he's explaining it. And this is you and I know I'm just kind of meandering, but this is you and I looking back 110 years, and the average level of just information acquisition is much easier. It's easier to have a higher IQ now because it's all just right in your hand. You go back to 1913, you just imagine some dude who's coming out of the coal mines and has got dirt soot on his face, and he doesn't know shit about shit. He didn't have the luxury of going to private high school and college, and he's just like, here's Woodrow, and Woodrow's he's a God-fearing man, he's married, he's white, and he said the bill's good, so it's good. And it's like, well, there's not a smoking gun there either. So I then I'm kind of realizing now as I'm saying it, am I looking for an insidious monster where it maybe doesn't lie? Am I seeing, what is it, like pareidolia, where you see faces in patterns where there aren't faces?
Mm-hmm.
Am I maybe, do I have to be objective and go, am I maybe trying to find, even though you and I are on the same page, like, no, there is a group of evil people, I'm finding it harder and harder to find the fingerprint. So I don't know if that really answers your question even remotely.
Well, no, it kind of it does, because I'm in the same place you are, being inquisitive about this, and if anything, with my own friends, right? And we've talked about the clinical stuff of COVID. You know, I have an independent pharmacy. I work a lot with the wellness company. The wellness company is passionate about bringing early treatment options for COVID and treating long haulers and vaccine treat, right? And when I talk to some of my colleagues, classmates, that ridiculed and chastised me, what's wrong with you? Why do you think hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin have a place in COVID? I'm like, what? Have you read any of the evidence? Well, no, I haven't read it, but I mean, that's just crazy. That's just, but wait a minute. What does the preponderance of the evidence show? How, just take a step back. And actually, I think a former classmate of mine actually thought I was going to punch him in the face when he came to visit Las Vegas, because I was just so pissed. And not that he's ridiculing me, saying, well, you know, I'm smarter than you. And I'm like, dude, here's the thing. You can tell me that you think you're smarter than me, but are you aware of the evidence? And if anything that's gotten me ticked off is what I'm telling you, the evidence shows about hydroxychloroquine for COVID, right? Or ivermectin, is when you tell me you haven't read any of the studies, any of the data at all. The thing that upsets me is you're shaming me, saying, well, you don't know anything. I'm smarter than you. I started out getting an immunology degree before I went to pharmacy school. So of course I'm smarter than you. I'm like, doofus, why don't you just become more inquisitive? Why don't you just ask, what? Well, wait a minute. I'm not familiar with the evidence. What does the evidence show? How much is out? What does it really mean? And when it comes to Woodrow Wilson, it's kind of like that same spirit that you and I have to apply, is that spirit of inquisitiveness, right? Without making an assumption, or as you're reading something, you know, there's confirmation bias when you
Mm-hmm.
see an image, right? And it's like, well, is he just part of the club? Because the obviousness is, well, the Federal Reserve Act was this huge thing that gave a lot of centralization of financial control outside the country, not part of the country, not the United States Treasury. No. This was an independent private bank that printed money. And of course, we know now, well, with printing the money, you make all these industrial oligarchs very wealthy. You have war after war, and there you go. We take over what we want. But what could it be that Woodrow Wilson was sold on? What the public was sold on about the Federal Reserve Act is, well, in our economy, we have boom and bust cycles. So in order for us to create a more flexible but stable financial system, we have to create this private bank. And what we can do is we can mess with interest rates. And if we have an economy that's growing out of control and we have hyperinflation, okay, well, let's kick up the interest rates. So my question to you is, do you think Wilson was sold on a bill of goods of why we needed the Federal Reserve Act? And then conspicuously, you know this, some of the biggest detractors, those against the Federal Reserve Act, wealthy men, well, what happened to them in 1912?
They'll die on the Titanic. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's, I think he was sold on it. There is also, just to play devil's advocate against my own position, it's also harder and harder to, you know, the farther back you go, it's harder and harder to find evidence of just really event. I mean, even now, it's like in 2023, you can go back and find Wikipedia articles on Operation, I think, Sycamore Timber, which is not even 10 years old. And it's about us running guns to what would become ISIS. It's like the delay between like that becoming like a conspiracy and then becoming a fact, it used to be like 50 years. Like, did you know the Gulf of Tonkin didn't actually happen? It was just radar returns. The delay used to be so much greater. So I also have to be a little wary of, you know, it's like some comedian pointed out. He's like, dude, he's like, you'll read about like a general giving a speech 2,000 years ago, You'll be like, how the fuck did they don't know this? They don't know exactly what the point is like, I'm also understanding that back then there's only so much that was copied down. I mean, go back to the 60s or go back to LBJ in office, right? Kennedy is in office. There's a gentleman's agreement that the reporters wouldn't report on all the whores leaving the White House, as Jackie was out with the kids, or LBJ would take questions while shitting, right? And that's just 50 years ago. 50 years prior to that, how much even more of a gentleman's agreement was there about,
Mm-hmm.
you don't ask a man, like, you don't ask a man about what he's doing with the Federal Reserve. Like, it was so highfalutin that I think he was sold on it. And I think that I, I don't think he's stupid because as the war is breaking out, he says, I think, and he's wrong in this. He goes, I think this war could set the world back 4 centuries, which it didn't. But he goes, afterwards, I see two permanent powers. This is in 1914.
Mm-hmm.
The United States and Russia, who will divide the world up into two spheres and kind of be at each other's throats. And then his top guy goes, maybe a third farther down the road, China. So
Right.
like they're looking ahead 110 years pretty accurately.
But
I
I think
can't
by then,
I was gonna say
go
I
go
can't
again.
I can't. So when I'm saying all that is I go, I don't know if I can give him an easy off and go, he was sold a bill of goods. This guy ain't dumb. And so he sees this, he understands this. I don't I guess I don't want to give him an easy pass out and go, oh, they tricked him. It's like I'm reading about you, Woodrow, and you're a brilliant fucking guy. But then for this one thing, oh, I didn't see what the Federal Reserve was. I, I, I don't know. I don't know if I buy it. Maybe he knew. Maybe he knew that there's power that you don't want to challenge. I don't know. Maybe it happened under duress. I mean, again, World War One's breaking out as his wife's dying, and he's like not all there.
Right.
I don't know. I'm
Your
will
face
I'm open to it. I'm open to either.
you're facing possibly a bust cycle. You're concerned about a massive depression and what that would lead to in basically in an early industrial economy, well, more mature by the early 20th century, highly still agricultural economy. And arguably, gosh, the United States was so completely self-sustaining at
Mm-hmm.
that point. So of course, it's like, well, stay out of those wars. And interesting, the sales pitch for the Federal Reserve was, well, you can get rid of these cycles. If we have an economic downturn, you don't have to worry so much about depressions because now we'll just print money and that'll stimulate
Yeah.
an economy and we'll go sell those bonds, right? So that would tell me now that we know, and you and I have read about pundits say, well, that only gets you so far. You just go ahead and print money. It has to be backed by something. So what did Kissinger do in I think it was 1973? He said, well, you know what? Forget this coupling of the United States currency to the gold. I mean, it was Nixon that took us off the gold standard, but Kissinger driving it, saying what we'll do is we'll just make sure that all oil purchased in the world, Saudis will only take the US dollar. And there you go. Everybody needs dollars to buy oil, and everyone needs oil. So if you want to have an embargo, a trade restriction, well, you can't buy treasury bonds, which means you can't buy US dollars, you can't buy oil, you're screwed. So they controlled energy. We'll defend you, we'll give you all of our military technology, but you have to do what? You have to displace leaders, and set up your own puppet governments, which is the CIA especially. That's what they did, and say, well, now we can just print money to no end because everybody's going to need dollars, no matter how little it's worth, to buy their oil. Look at the pendulum swinging the other way. I think at the time, the implementation of the Federal Reserve Act, they only had a certain window. So let's say just until 1973, before they went on the complete petrodollar system. They knew, well, we have to extend this out. We have to extend out the life of the Federal Reserve note, which actually isn't the dollar. So let's call it the FERN, right? We have to extend the life of that. So let's create this petrodollar. Oh, you know what? Anytime we need to make more money, we'll just have a war break out in the Middle East, Everybody around the world gets scared. They hoard their dollars. So they buy a bunch of US Treasury bonds. And it's like, look how much we're selling. So they can dicker with interest rates, the value of the currency, drive an economy. And I think, I don't know if Woodrow Wilson was told all this, but definitely told that, look, Federal Reserve can control boom and bust cycles. And there were certainly some short term economic benefits from it. But how short term? Because what did we have in 1929? Printing fiat currency relentlessly, you end up with an induced crash. But if you make the money, you and your friends, your cabal or your little group, your community of interest. So we talked previously on the other show about IG Farben, group of German industrialists, and how that IG stands for one German word, Interessengemeinschaft, which means of common interests, our community of interests. So if you can imagine a bunch of cigar smoking fat cats that say, okay, well, how can we all make money together? Well, let's put these two nations at war. You're going to go make tanks. You turn your tractor factory into a tank factory. We got to create an enemy. And you know what we don't want to do is we want to have this perpetual enemy. If you're thinking like these nefarious snakes, gosh, creating the United States and Russia as two diametrically opposed enemies is something you want. Now, the Bolsheviks took over Russia. They basically they threw over Russian politics in 1917. Okay, right at the end of the First World War. Okay, guys, let's make these two permanent enemies, because what happened the last time US and Russia allied, a lot of people don't know. Russia was crucial in the American Revolutionary War effort.
Mm-hmm.
They supplied arms, and the French sent over troops. They sent cannons as well. They sent money. Russians sent money, but Russians took on the largest, most powerful navy in the world. They blockaded the British. So the British were not able to adequately supply as much as they wanted to the colonies. Now, they underestimated the colonials and the French alignment to stick it to the Brits, right? But without Russia blockading, so you have two nations that are kind of very similar at the time. You know, you have predominantly Caucasian nations that are Christian. It's like, you know what? We're sandwiched between these two giants. We want to make sure that they're enemies forever. So let's create a Cold War. Sure, send a bunch of German scientists over to create not a space agency and say, oh, you know what? We need nuclear missiles. And then the Russians say, yeah, we need nuclear missiles too. Great. We're going to suck money from your population. Now, Russia, we already have communism there, so we're good. But, you know, your economic and industrial capacity was essentially destroyed by the Second World War. But United States, you know what? They weren't attacked. Their industrial capacity is enormous. But we'll take control of them. We'll use the U.S. military for a period of time to control the world. And, you know, and do we? We have 720 military bases in 200 countries. That's quite an empire. And it all had to begin with the Federal Reserve Act. So how can you not think, gosh, Woodrow Wilson, he had to know. We didn't know when we began studying this stuff, like there really is a globalist cabal, and this is how they've operated for a long time. So with the advent of the Federal Reserve Act, this first private act, I think Woodrow Wilson was quite possibly sold on a bill of goods. He did other stuff too. We got to talk about the Trading with the Enemy Act. And then look at where we are today. Look how long their cycle has lasted. I think there's going to be, you know, some downfall to it all, that this is now being known to people in the United States and people around the world. Say, we've got to get rid of this printable currency that actually has no value. And as soon as we get rid of that, well, there's no more money to go say, well, let's start this war over here, because it doesn't cost us anything. We just print money, and we don't care about the lives lost. And let's build the heck out of war machinery that we need. And it doesn't cost us anything because we print the money. Everybody needs dollars to buy oil, but that's changing rapidly.
I was gonna say, and it feels like we're setting up for another Cold War with China. I think they looked back at it and they're like, it's like a band playing the hits. I think they're looking back and they're like, what was our greatest hit? You know, they're like 9/11 was good, World War I was good, World War II was good. We got rid of a lot of people. But man, they're looking back at the Cold War and they're going, that was primo. That was
Froze.
I froze?
Oh, there. No,
Yeah.
just for a second. Yeah, you're
Oh,
right. I heard you say we got rid of a lot of people
we got
after
rid
9.
of a lot of people, but I think they're looking at the Cold War and going, "That was our best work." That's a band looking back at their platinum album, and they're like, 50 years. I mean, 45 unofficially 49, 50. We'll call it 45, 45 to 91. All right, we'll call it 45 years. 45 years. It's the only real damage was to third world countries, second world countries. We didn't actually bomb everything like we did with World War II. That got a little out of hand. We bombed all the places we love, all these white European countries. Cold War, we kind of relegated it to like Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Korea, whatever, right? Middle East. We spent so much money and we kept it going for multiple presidencies, right? It was so big that it wasn't just a 4-year cycle. It was presidents could come in and instead of being challenged on a new bill, they could look, they go, it's the Cold War. We got to fight the Soviets. We need lasers in space. And no one bats an eye. It's, well, you're not a red, are you? I think they're looking back at that, whoever they are. And I think they're trying to set up another one with China. But to pivot back to, because I guess that will be another episode, back to Woodrow Wilson, is he sold a bill of goods, or, Eisenhower had nuts. Eisenhower, the biggest mic drop ever, is giving the military industrial complex speech in the Oval Office. Like, there's no more putting your nuts out on the table. And he could, because it's a 5-star. It's Dwight Eisenhower, right? He could make one press conference and he'd have every World War II vet, in DC in a week, right? They'd fucking walk. It's Ike. You wonder, was Woodrow Wilson, is he more similar to me? A guy that grew up in a nuclear family with nothing but opportunity and private schooling. How much shit do I really talk when I'm in the Oval Office and the wealthiest and thus most dangerous men in the world tell me that we're pushing for the Federal Reserve? And they're giving me an out. They're going, oh, this is the bill of goods. Whether or not I believe the bill of goods, am I thinking, do I keep that to myself? Am I Dwight? Or am I folding under the pressure? So what is it? Is it under duress? Or was he really just an idealist that was like, yeah, this will be perfect. We'll get rid of depressions. We'll print our way out of it. Is he looking that far ahead? But then it comes back to the whole Russia, America. It's like, you got a brain, you got a brain between your ears. You ain't stupid. You clearly had to have seen what this was. This was an extra governmental power move. So I don't know. What's your ruling on Woodrow?
Well, here's the thing. It wasn't the only move. So if we just focused on the Federal Reserve Act, you can make the case that Wilson didn't predict what the Federal Reserve Act would ultimately lead to, because did he predict the full move to a petrodollar? No, there was some decoupling of the dollar to gold. I think they moved to a 10-to-1 ratio at the time under Wilson. Okay. There was some decoupling. So was that a surprise to him that the Federal Reserve Act would do that? And was their excuse, no, dude, we have to do this. We're bankers. You have to trust us. Otherwise, we're going to have these terrible economic collapses. And then why did we have the roaring 20s? Well, they printed money like crazy, right? Knowing that it would lead to a massive economic collapse, which would allow these corporate oligarchs to buy whatever companies they wanted, right? And they did. So did Wilson know that? You could make the case that he didn't. Certainly make the case for Eisenhower. He gave that military-industrial complex speech because on his way out, he saw, man, we've been infiltrated, and this military-industrial complex is a problem. So they slid Kennedy in, and I think Kennedy, they thought, well, this is our boy. He's just a guy who likes women and drinks, and his dad was a risky runner. He's one of us. Little did they know.
Dad's mafia. He's not gonna clap back.
But Kennedy had love of country. Kennedy fought in the Second World War. His PT boat, he was rescued after his PT boat sunk by the Z Special Unit. Kennedy had some patriotism. Kennedy gave his speech too about splintering the CIA into 1,000 pieces after he was told, well, we got to go invade Vietnam, and we can't tell you why, sir, because it's national security. So why is it national security? Why are we going to go invade this. Well, you got to worry about Russia and taking over. But it's over there in Vietnam. How's that going to impact the United States? And he said, forget it. He was pissed and he wanted to get rid of the CIA. But back to Wilson, the Trading with the Enemy Act. Okay, there's something to be said about that. So, well, in 1917, America entered the First World War. And it made sense. Okay, Wilson enacted Trading with the Enemy Act because its objective was to restrict trade with countries we were at war with countries that were at war with the United States and had problematic elements. So, okay, so we got that. But it was a lot of executive overreach, is what the critics would say, who analyzed it, because now we had a private authority that had extraordinary control over our financial aspects of the country. Right, we're printing money, and those dollars are being used to fuel this war, which it's obvious now as we look back. Well, that's one of the main objectives that they wanted. They wanted to fuel this war and use the U.S. war machine to destroy Europe and coalesce into smaller powers, because we've already got control of Russia. You know, in 1917, they had control of Russia via communism, and notice they've got control of China via communism now. Gosh, this top-down structure really works for us. But back in the United States, the Trading with the Enemy Act granted unprecedented authority to the president to control economic transactions. So it made sense. That was the sales pitch in the papers, right? Well, we got to restrict our trade with countries we're at war with. But you allow the president to unilaterally seize assets of corporations or individuals, restrict trade. So if you can restrict trade, say, don't do business with these people, you got to do business with these guys. If you're back to those industrialists, the oligarchs, the IG Farbins, the bankers, no, Mr. President, can't do business with people over in these countries. You got to do business with these companies here. Yeah, we're shareholders. Yes, we happen to own them. Yes, they're within our community, but that's what we need this Trading with the Enemy Act. That's what it was all about. So how much trade restriction can you tolerate if you own a small business, which was one of my arguments. You know, the Board of Pharmacy here in Nevada said, you're not allowed to use or dispense hydroxychloroquine for COVID. And I gave them a one-finger response. It wasn't this. Like, go ahead. Because that's called restriction of trade. And that's the Nevada Board of Pharmacy. And it was also the Nevada Board of Medicine acting as the doctor. Because denying a treatment is a medical intervention. So who are you? And sadly, most medical practitioners went along with, okay, well, I'm not allowed to use it, even though it might have a lot of benefit and it's really safe. Drugs have been used in the very old and the very young for a long time, but okay, well, who benefited from it? The vaccines, due to the fear campaign, the manufacturers of Paxlovid, which causes a rebound effect. It's very expensive, doesn't really work, very expensive. And the manufacturers of remdesivir, also known as Your Death is Near, which is a failed antiviral drug that never made it to market because it proved too toxic and ineffective in what we call phase 3 clinical trials, phase 3 trials in humans. But you can take this pig, let's dress it up and stick it under the Emergency Use Authorization Act because it's an emergency. So let's jam this IV of remdesivir into people who are admitted to the hospital, despite the fact that it causes multi-organ dysfunction in 65% of patients, according to clinical trials. See, when you have that much economic control, you can grant favor to those industries. So the overreach of the Trading with the Enemy Act, now that I look back through that lens, through the recent COVID lens, well, you have a lot of executive power to regulate commerce. And how tricky and sly is it? Because that's what these liars do. They just lie and deceive, right? The snake beguiled, right? Satan beguiled Eve. That's what they do. They beguile and deceive and say, well, you really need this. And, you know, back to the discussion with my neighbor, or we call the normies today. First, you have to realize that, you know, that there is an enemy. And then you have a lot of people who say, well, I hear what you're saying, and it kind of makes sense, Robert, about these people, but who would want to do that? Who would want to release a vaccine that killed or injured so many people? Who would want to do that? Just because you don't, just because you can't bring to imagine yourself to do this, doesn't mean that there aren't individuals out there who would. So what do you think about that? Now we've got two things with regard to Woodrow Wilson. Did he know that this was centralization of power? Was he powerless? Was he careless? Or was he part of the cabal because we had the Federal Reserve Act and the Trading with the Enemy Act, which a lot of people could argue, well, what have we had in recent history that's similar to the Trading with the Enemy Act? The Patriot Act. Because when you restrict commerce, you're restricting freedom of business. Well, what did the Patriot Act do? Patriot Act said, well, under the guise of national security, we have to restrict your freedoms, and we have to monitor and watch the heck out of you and see where you go, and we have to scan you in and out of airports. We have to have biometrics. We got to be able to snoop into your background. It's all under the Patriot. Who cares? The Fourth Amendment? Now it's gone. We've got this emergency. What do you think about all that?
I was gonna pull up, not was, I am. I'm gonna pull up one of my. I've pulled this up before, and I think this is what's led to me finally reading this book, is I've used this quote before. And I was like, I need to learn about Woodrow Wilson. But it's this quote, and I always use it when I talk about Kennedy to Eisenhower to Smedley Butler. I'm always like, how far back does this shit go? Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the United States, in the field of commerce and manufacture, are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere, so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. I mean, is that not like a more gentlemanly, proper way of saying, 50 years later, in the councils of government, we must be, we must safeguard against the, the influence of a military industrial complex. And then you fast forward 50 more years and it's they're deep state, they're rich people, they don't like you and me. Are they not talking about the same thing? Like, whatever it is. So to me, this is just, again, it's easy to say in my apartment in 2023, I'm not, in the Oval Office. But to me, it's making him more guilty because it's going like, all right, you're not totally evil. You're not part of it. I don't think. You're also not an idiot, so you can't claim that. You're a good guy, I think, so far. He seemed to be a good guy, bit of an idealist, probably would have been a better just like farmer instead of president. But you're also not stupid. That is on your shoulders. You do know something's going on. And I can't say I would be any different. I don't know. Again, it's very easy for me to say this because I'm not in the Oval Office with a proverbial gun to my head. But, the buck stops here. You had to, and you're not stupid maybe for letting it go by. Kennedy didn't let it, and, they removed his head. But it seems like he knew something was going on. Dr. Seik, I'm going to go pee real quick. You're going to take over. Welcome to Dr. Seik Cast.
Okay. Well, I'll just keep talking and we can discuss it when you get back, Tom. I know that you're recording this, but, when you first told me, hey, we're going to talk about Woodrow Wilson, the Federal Reserve Act popped into my mind. And then, of course, the Trading with the Enemy Act. And like you said, can we correlate to current times the relationship of both of those things, the complete control of printing a fiat currency, number one, and number two, think of what a violation of civil liberties it is to restrict commerce and who you trade with the advent of the Trading with the Enemy Act. Because what if you had a business at the time, pre-war, pre-First World War, that had complex relationships with international companies? I mean, now I guess we don't have so complex relationships because China just makes most of the stuff and we bring it here. But what if you needed materials to make goods in the United States from 2 or 3 different countries to make something? What if you needed raw materials from a country that was rich in a certain resource that we didn't have? And all of a sudden, under the Trading with the Enemy Act, you're no longer allowed to buy from that company. You're not at war with that company. And what's obvious to me, which may or may not be true, I'm not an expert economic analyst, is that the centralization of this control, probably by the same groups of people that are controlling the Federal Reserve and influence Wilson to implement the Trading with the Enemy Act, of course, just like IG Farben, just like John D. Rockefeller, they were able to work with a small group of oligarchs, industrialists, whatever you want to call them, to give favor to themselves. And I don't know if you were to hear all that, Tommy, but I was just talking about the two big glaring things of Woodrow Wilson's presidency: the Federal Reserve Act and the passage of the Trading with the Enemy Act, the act, and how much that second one just curtails civil liberties in terms of who you trade with. And who would that benefit? Well, if you've got industrialists and oligarchs that say, well, you can't trade with these companies, trade with ours. What if you had an industry that depended on goods or raw materials from another country? You're not at war with the company, but you could potentially destroy that entire industry in the United States and lead to greater centralization and the rise of larger industries that just had more control. So looking through that second lens, well, should Woodrow Wilson have known better? When I do the math and I add the Federal Reserve Act to the Trading with the Enemy Act, I say, you know what? Probably. And how did they influence him? Was it trickery? But like you said, he's an intelligent dude. He's a smart dude. Was it threat and coercion? I mean, does he have habits that we don't know about, or was he showing pictures? Hey, you know what? We'd really like you to go along with this, or you see what we did to these people, and you show them pictures of people that are just tortured and maimed. I mean, that's the easy way.
Or you talk about Titanic. I mean, Titanic's a couple of years in the right. Titanic's 1 year in the rearview mirror from Federal Reserve. Hey, remember that? You got to remember that was like the 9/11 of the day. It was like,
yeah,
oh God, right? Hey, you know who else was? Isn't that kind of weird that John Jacob Astor was on that? Huh? You think you would have? Weird. Anyway.
Yeah. I mentioned on the show previously, my education, let's call it the red pilling, probably began in 2014. That a good friend of mine is still serving as an admiral in the Navy, mentor. And he used to say things to me about what's going on in the world that at the time would sound outrageous, but those are breadcrumbs to see if I would look at him and go, okay, listen, you're a smart guy. I know you're not lying to me, but I don't know anything about what you're talking about. So in 2018, it took me 4 years to say, if you're not just going to commission me, which he didn't, if you're not going to commission me, why don't you at least give me some training like you do your flag officers. And I sent you after the previous show the list of books that he told me to dive into.
Which people did ask me last time to put in the comments, and I did it because I'm a fucking idiot and I just remembered it. So sorry, keep talking.
Now you'll get it.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up right now. I'll put it
and you'll see what Black's Law Dictionary. You got to understand terms because your audience is probably all aware, no matter how outrageous it sounds, that we are all dead men lost at sea. The British Accreditation Registry runs our legal system. The judge in the black robes at your summons is summoning your dead soul that you need a law sayer to speak on your behalf, because once you cross the threshold, which is the threshold of the ship, you're in their jurisdiction. You're not in a common law court. You're in a court controlled by the Brits, and you're a dead man. You don't necessarily have rights. And once you realize that, well, that's the setup, no matter how crazy it sounds, then you dive deeper. And another layer of that control that we don't see, and I'm sure you've talked plenty about it on other episodes, Operation Paperclip. So Black's Law Dictionary was the first book. He said, you got to understand the terms. You got to understand the word understand, right? You have to understand what summons means, right? When you're summoned to the court. And the second book on that list was very detailed by Jim Marrs, called The Rise of the Fourth Reich. And if anything, it's a lot of names and a lot of details. Not only does it involve the Dulles brothers, but where all these Nazis went all over the world, including Russia. If you think, no, there's no way that we're still fighting the Nazis. Pretty interesting how they hide the control of that empire.
Brilliant.
And it's brilliant. We're facing the same enemy today that infiltrated the United States. The military industrial complex siphoned billions and billions of dollars over time, billions and billions of these inflated. Well, let's print the money, but then let's tell people, well, this is where we're putting it. And we're going to make the dollar absolutely worthless because that's one way that we're taxing you. Oh, and by the way, we're also going to tax you to build all these nuclear missiles because we need it because Russia's such a threat. And then, oh, we got to go into this country. We have to invade this country. And let's go to Afghanistan. And, what do we do after 9/11? It's the same MO over and over because control has been so centralized. And I think, the good thing about, or the good reason why we're talking about Woodrow Wilson is because major steps were made toward the centralization of control that's outside of the typical government and outside of what the will of the people want. So let's talk about Congress for a second. And Congress begins with CON for a reason. And I was bringing up a point about my Admiral book because I said, when you realize that these bankers that just print, when they just make the money out of thin air, who can they not bribe? Who can they not influence? He says, but you don't understand when it comes to politicians. He says, yes, they may or may not do that. He said, but they don't need to. When it comes to a politician that they need to bring in the line, he says, the technique is very simple. They do show pictures, photos of, hey, look what we did to this person. Look, you see all these injuries on the body. Look how they were tortured and burned. And this is what we did to them before they died. So, you know what? You better think twice about how you vote on this certain thing, Congressman. And he said, it's really easy and simple and just human nature. Oh, you have kids, they're all here. We could get them easily anytime. And we can do this to them, or they can be threatened. So do what we say or else. You imagine that? Because your eyebrows are going up because then you realize, well, who did they not get to in Congress? And I asked him one day, I said, who can we trust? Because we had a discussion one day about Rand Paul, for example. Okay, so back to the COVID stuff that I'm passionate about. And for all of Rand Paul's yelling and shaming at Fauci and do this, and did he ever call for his arrest? Did he ever call for a deeper investigation? It was nothing but a show. Then you realize that Rand Paul and his wife are invested. There's got to be a short list of investment brokers and fund managers in DC because they made money from Gilead Sciences and BioNTech and Pfizer, just like everyone else in Congress. And it's just embarrassing. It makes you question everything when the mechanisms of control is so easy when you can just print the money out of thin air, and you don't even need to do that. You just threaten. Can imagine yourself and someone says, it's not about you. You can tell me that you can endure, horrible torture and all this stuff, but you've got a family. Yeah, we'll just take them. It'll be easy. And so think about how you're going to vote, Congressman, right? So
is there any way to rectify any of it? So it's like how do you fight back against that? It's out of the realm of any sort of civil government. It's clearly they've resorted to our most base instincts of just threats. Is there any way to counter that other than a military coup? How do you fight that? You'd fight that with a standing army. And so the people that threaten you in silence of we're going to do this to your family, you would just have to counter that with like Delta Force. Like, you can't make those. You can make those threats to me because I'm doing a podcast in a bedroom. But those threats don't really work to like those threats don't. You can't use those at military people. So, is there any way to rectify this other than just how do you deal with that?
I asked him this exact question, and what I gathered is that first, and we've seen it posted many different ways, many different times, the military is the only way to solve our civilian issues. And I fully trust and believe that there's going to come a time when we see the removal of illegitimate civilian leadership. Maybe or maybe not, there's going to be a temporary military, some kind of continuity control. And then we have to figure out how to have legit and fair elections monitored by the military to get back to civilian leadership that the population wants. But that's only one layer. You've got to remove the control of the fiat currency. It's almost like this. You seen the Lord of the Rings movies or read the books?
Mm-hmm.
The formless Dark Lord Sauron at Mordor, that big tower, the all-seeing eye that's on the Federal Reserve note. Okay, that all-seeing eye. Is that a representation of the Eye of Horus? I don't know. but wants to have hegemonic control over everything Middle Earth. And you have groups of people, maybe it's countries, maybe it's more than that have to get together to fight this one central evil, meaning the central bank evil. Still got a lot of problems to solve. But if you can take away the printed money that they can use to make weapons, to fund militaries, if you can take that, and wars have to be fought in real assets, real commodities, maybe it's gold, silver, maybe it's beyond. Maybe as a country, you think twice about expending those resources. The other thing is this. Could you have a leader, meaning the US military, at least the Space Force, but I'm sure it's beyond that. Can you have a leader step in and go to these countries and say, you know what? You know what our real enemy is? It's that. It's these central bankers. It's these corporate oligarchs. So how about this? Why don't we team up all of our militaries? We've got all kinds of intelligence. And we start taking them out. When I asked my friend, I said, how is it going to be done? He said, one by one. He said, we have to go by the book. And he's even told me, he says, if we just go and just start mowing down these people like we're lawnmowers, he says, you kind of become them. He says, we hold ourselves.
You would become even if they were doing the right thing in our minds, people wouldn't be incorrect to say you're just the new bully.
Well,
right. I mean, technically sure. You would be, and even if we think it's justified, that's always the justification.
Exactly what he said. And he also said, and what would take its place in the vacuum?
Yeah.
He said, can you trust what takes its place? He says, so we have to be by the book as much as we can. He said, that doesn't mean we don't have to do the stuff, because when they're given a choice and they choose, the more harsh of the outcomes, hey, it happens. And I don't know exactly what that means. And of course, he's never told me about operations and stuff like that. But I can gather, I can surmise. Yeah. And you have to take out the control of the central banks, realizing who that enemy is, because we talked about China, and here's the way I see it with China, because Americans that have been waking up have realized, hey, wait a minute, you're trying to bring communism here. We don't like that stuff. We don't want to be under the totalitarian social credit score, digital currency. You're not allowed to transact like China is. China's got a lot of people, a lot of population under the control of so very few. So you think about the control of their Communist Party over the population. It's a huge difference compared to the United States. So the central bankers, I bet that in the Eisenhower Kennedy days, they realized, you know what? Eventually, these Americans are going to wake up. And one, we can own the whole country if we just bankrupt them. So we can let them fall and then we own America. Two, if these Americans wake up, that might not work out so well for us. So we're going to need another nation to control the world militarily for us. So let's make sure that China gets all the patents from the United States. Let's build their military. Let's give them all and tell China as the contractor, look, you're going to do this. And maybe the Chinese communists, well, they're definitely motivated. The Han Chinese, which make up a small portion of their population, I think 13%, but still 13% of 1.2 billion, right? They are the descendants of the Khans, like Genghis Khan. And they believe that within the Chinese ethnicities, that they are the superior, that they should rule the entire world, that every human on the world should be Han Chinese and only Han Chinese. And they don't care if they say, well, let's experiment by spraying this spike protein aerosolized everywhere and see how many people die in Wuhan or Guangzhou. Oh, okay. Well, let's do all of our death modeling based on that. So when we deploy this bioweapon in the multiple mechanisms we're going to do so, we can kind of infer how many people in the United States are going to die. And this is all part of a plan, because you probably saw in the book list that I sent to you a book called The 100-Year Marathon by Michael Pillsbury.
I've read that.
Right. So China's basic control was, okay, 4-stage plan to take over the United States. We're going to work subversion, which the Stasi taught the Russian communists how to do. And Yuri Bezimov, okay, he defected to the United States and said, look, this is what's going on. This is Andropov's goal. And you know what? This is bad for the whole world. So that's why I'm telling you. Right. And probably got tired of eating like onion soup all day as the only thing he had to eat. So he's defected to the United States. I think there's a group of people so smart that we don't know about, that are quiet, that have come up with a counter to all of this. And public awakening is one of the biggest things that you have to participate in, because one, you need a public that is aware of just, let's just call one thing or two things: election fraud and why fiat currency is bad. So you need a public that is aware to embrace the fact that there was election fraud and we need to look at it, and we need to figure out how to not have fraudulent elections. And number two, this fiat currency, man, this is bad news. We're going to have potentially another economic bust cycle here, because I just read an article last week that the new home sales have declined 45%, which is a larger decline than before the 2008 market crash. And I'm sensitive to that still. It took me a while to, I had two houses. I'm living in Las Vegas. Real estate prices are rocketing up. One house I lived in, and one house I'm like, okay, I'm going to have one as a rental. 60% decline in the house value. I was below water in two mortgages, right? That hurt. So imagine this on a mass scale. And if it occurs again. So the precursors to that are what? Inflation. You have interest rates ticking up, fewer and fewer people qualify. And one of the canaries that's a signal is a dramatic delta in new home sales, 45% decline. This is just in the recent weeks. A little bit different today, I think, because another thing I talked to my bud about is, I said, well, I don't get it. Homes are still selling rapidly. There's not like a lot of homes on the market. He said, oh, well, BlackRock is running an AI supercomputer. It's actually underground in the state of Washington. And their goal is to purchase every single family home in America and turn us into a nation of renters. He says, here's some free tools for all of you diggers out there, and diggers on your show. If you can, look at a particular metropolitan areas. You know, around me, there's Las Vegas, Phoenix, Salt Lake City. How many Airbnb, VRBO rentals were there just 5 years ago compared to today? I mean, I notice up and down in my street, my little community, where you're not supposed to have short-term rentals. It's 90 days. That's the shortest term you're allowed to have, according to the HOA. But come on, Vegas is a party town. There's people that come here to Vegas. There's certain aromas that are in the air. My boys ask me, what's that? Well, it's the new renters that are here for a week, probably in Vegas to party. And there's others too. There's all the, gosh, we're so desperate for nurses here. There's a lot of traveling nurses. Mm-hmm. But there's at least 3 homes on just the 2 streets in my community that I spend my time on. I go this way and then I go that way to get to work, that are definitely short-term rentals. The cars are always changing. There's always somebody like showing them how to get into the house. They have the digital locks. Those are all telltale signs of that's another Airbnb. And it's like, whoa, this is dramatically changing the landscape of home ownership in the country. And I wonder if it's something that is induced, because if you just look at BlackRock, which a lot of people allege is just an extension of the Federal Reserve, it's a territory grab right now. And if you have an AI supercomputer that's helping you figure out how to get all of these homes, maybe you don't care about the market price of the home, you just want it. You're looking at the lifetime value of renting that home to people who are just struggling. And you know, there's some very erudite videos on TikTok, and somebody put up a video, said, look, even during the Great Depression, rent was still only about 12% of your entire income. Your $1,300 a year, but your rent, if you rented a flat, was 12% of your income, and now it's 40 or 42%. A car is 48% of the average annual income. So the average annual income during the Great Depression, 1930, $1,300 a year. And today, I think the average annual income is like 50-some thousand. And people making 50,000 a year, even the 2-income households, 2 people doing that. So what are they not doing? Someone is not staying at home raising the kids. They have to go to a school to become indoctrinated, right? I'm a business owner, but I basically have bought myself a job. I pay myself like I'm paying another pharmacist a wage. And I'm fortunate to have my wife be able to stay at home and homeschool the kids. But I'm paying more than ever than I ever have for pharmacy technicians, for cashiers, people to pack boxes. And, you know, we're doing okay at the moment. And I just wonder sometimes, I'm like, gosh, when it costs you over $100 to fill up the tank in your car, and groceries are so expensive, if you don't have 2 parents working, making that median income, I think it is 53,000, 54,000 a year. If you don't have two people working under one household, or two people working making 80 some thousand a year, and they're still struggling. And I tell this to my wife all the time. I said, I pay bonuses and I'm above the market, but gosh, even then. And I sent her a video, and it was some woman put together, oh gosh, it must have been a dozen different people saying, our household is making more money than ever, and we're just struggling. And this is horrible. We should be a prosperous nation. People's dollar shouldn't be taxed to death. And look how timely it was. Gosh, that Oliver Anthony song my boys listen to all the time, because that resonates across multitudes of communities to say, you're right. Here's all these rich fat cats, the Black Rocks, the investors. My whole long diatribe about this was how angry I am at Congress coming out as multimillionaires when the rest of America is struggling. I've had to be nimble as a small business owner. It hasn't been easy to stay in business, but at least I've been able to deftly make some changes to keep going. But it's not easy when the price of goods keep going up. Nevada Energy, my electric provider, 10% increase in electricity utilities for residential and business after January 1st. 10%. That's a lot of cake. That's a lot of bread. And, we have to have a major change and reduce some of this over-centralized control, get back to free market economies. You don't have a free market when one entity like BlackRock is buying homes. That's not a free market. And that's what, back to Woodrow Wilson, the long arc. Now I'm thinking, at the end of this class, well, you could make the case that he just didn't know. You could say that, well, okay, he was influenced. But then when I look at those two data points, Federal Reserve Act and Trading with the Enemy Act, dude, he could have been under complete control, or he was a misanthrope, just like, FDR. And he was a misanthropic human being. He could have been a miserable human being like them, and just, that sold us out as America. You sell out a real commodities-backed currency, and look what we have. We have corporate oligarchy rule today. And I say that to some people that I'm cautious enough to let them know, to not say to them, there's a group of central banker, this is the cabal. It all originates with the central bank. You can tie it back to various bloodlines of families that control the wealth of the world, and they just want to more and more and more and hoard it all. They don't believe in economic prosperity. There's them, and there's everybody else who's dirt poor. Oh, and you know what? We don't need these people, so let's just eliminate them through starvation, disease, or whatever. Oh, but we have multiple objectives. If it's going to be disease, well, let's sell them this thing that they paid for, and then it makes them sick, so they have to buy all the treatments from us, which is what John D. Rockefeller wanted. And if you can't even go that far with your brain, and you just think that, well, the government, big business, and the Federal Reserve have worked together to control as much industry, financial policy, and industry as much as possible, you don't have freedom to run your own business. You don't have the freedom that home ownership would allow, because the market's all manipulated in favor, being controlled by, taken over by the very wealthy elite. So I know that's a long diatribe, and two major milestones that put us in that direction came under Woodrow Wilson's watch: Federal Reserve Act and the Trading with the Enemy Act. I mean, it makes me look at the guy through that prism now, thinking, well, should have known better, dude.
No, you've won me over. It's very simple. Those two things happened, and he's not stupid. So draw your own. No, he's either on board willingly or unwillingly, but he's on board. I was going to ask, and I know you said you got to run, so I will give you that if you want. But I'm interested in your Admiral buddy, because I've always thought, like, what would happen if you could snap your fingers and kind of get rid of all the evil power in the world? And my only conclusion's always been like, oh, how quickly would it just be filled again? How quickly would that void be filled? I don't know if you want to save that for another show, or.
I'll give you I've asked this question.
Sure.
Everything you're thinking of, I think of too. You know why? Because we're both solution-oriented people. We don't want to deal with this again. We want to solve the problem. We're going to go through some pain.
Get rid of it. Don't put a Band-Aid on it, though. Fucking fix it and be done with it.
And when I asked him, he says, well, He says, do you realize how much different our education system is compared to before Nelson Rockefeller took it over in 1965? He said, have you ever seen on some social media channels, here's a test, eighth grade test from the year like 1780. And it's super like, it's like these rivers and these European and this European continent border which countries on the eastern side? Okay, you had to know different facts. That's just facts, fact knowing, but you had to read during that time. And what he said was, look at the average intellectual capacity and educational experience of the average American today. And by design, he said, we have been dumbed down as a country. And he said, so you have to overcome that, which means you had to put a plan in place. So let's say you and I are part of the planning group. Maybe we're military, maybe we're not. We say, okay, how are we going to rip out all of these woke people, these teachers? And also, the wife of my neighbor across the street is a school principal. And I asked her one day, I said, and she knows my boys are homeschooled. I said, how bad is it? Because Clark County School District, where we are, it's something like 80% of high school graduates don't even have measurable proficiency in math, basic math. My 13-year-old is on algebra 2 because we're homeschooled. And she said, Robert, she said, it's worse than it's ever been. I'm putting in my tenure and getting out because I have children that are teaching children, my teachers. She said, when the teacher wage really isn't just that bad. She said, but what's available to be teachers? And then the school pushes, the Clark County School District pushes the policy of what's going to be curriculum. And she said, it's so much worse than it was here 10 years ago. She said, also thank the Bushes for that, for putting in the No Child Left Behind Act. She said, all that did was make all their family friends a lot of money. It's called the No Child Left Untested Act. So you have to change education. So if we were going to play that, I know that Elon Musk, and there's a lot of debate about, okay, well, what side is he on? He's got an idea, an academy called Ad Astra, to the stars, that he uses for his Tesla employees, for their kids, Tesla and SpaceX employees. Well, you know, you're right, because I caught a small clip that resonates in our household. My boys are allowed very little screen time, but Elon Musk said, you know, you can become useful, relevant, and skilled at anything for free in 3 months on YouTube. So the biggest thing my wife and I try to instill in the boys is, look, you've got to always be learning stuff. There's your regular curriculum that you got to do, and then there's your pleasure study that you got to do, and they got to have some fun times too. But my point with all that is, how are we going to change it? Is we, the people, have to drive it. You've got to either become involved in your schools, which we see that. We see some school boards getting fired because of the wokeness of their schools, or you have to homeschool the kids and say, you've got to participate in 21st century world, and you have to know stuff, you have to learn stuff and have skills, number one. And number two, the participation. That's the, if I had one word, participation. We all have to participate, because yeah, my wife was part of the people that went and counted votes in other counties here in Nevada. We know we had, I mean, just massive. My wife and I both spoke multiple times at school board meetings, and we don't have kids at school. We're speaking against masks, we're speaking against vaccine mandates. You've got to go. And we asked other people to go with us too. And we would get a few. And then there's this group of people. We can't have this. You got to get off the, you got to get involved, because we that care about this stuff, our children, look, start there. And then our local politicians too. Gosh, we've been to all the commissioners meetings. They're a troop out here of commies. Again, mask mandates, closing down businesses. They would shut people down. Gosh, there was a guy running for political office who was removed from a commissioners meeting in Clark County, and he was brutally removed by their security, which I don't even know if it was Metro Police or not. And as they took him out, there was a metal detector that knocked over, and the guy got a concussion. A political candidate, because they don't want to hear it. They want to cut you off. They give you 2 minutes. Okay, thank you for talking. We only have this much time. No. You're going to hear me speak. So the public has to get involved and overwhelm these people, because don't be this person. Another couple that we know, the mom stays home. Okay. Dad works butt off, right? I know, I'm friends with the dad. 2 girls the same age as our 2 boys. Hey, Just come with us, sit in the audience. We're going to go do this. Our kids aren't in school. Hers were. Griping about the masks, griping about the vaccine mandates. Well, I just don't know what I'm going to do. Okay, if here's what you can do. You can write this letter. We've already got it formatted for you. Here's the address. Just go print this out, put a stamp on it, and go. Why don't you show up with us at a school board meeting? I don't know. It's a 15-minute drive. Okay, we are not going to make the change until we have more people that get involved. You don't have to go and argue and raise a ruckus and chaos. You need to inject intelligently. Just show up. You got to do some work and show up. That's what I tell some of my baseline employees here that say, well, I want to do more. I want to listen. Here's what I need you to do right now. I need you to show up and I need you to do this work. You want to get trained? You don't want to pack boxes anymore? You want to be a technician? Okay, apply to get your pharmacy technician and training license. We'll train you here. 1,500 hours. I'll pay for your test, right? Hey, I'm already a pharmacy technician. I want to work in the laboratory where you make stuff. Okay, great. Tell you what, I'll send you to training. Cost me about $4,000. I'll send you to training. You come back, but you're going to have to give me, a year's worth of work for me to pay for this for you, but you'll get a raise and come in. So people who are drivers, that's the only way we're going to change that in the country. And what does your show do? I hope we've educated some people today to realize, you know what? There's things that I could do. I could just show up and support the people that are speaking. I could write letters. I could get them out there. And I can't say everybody can do this, man, because you got the other side too. Probably have a lot of your audience saying, dude, I'm working my butt off, overtime hours. I'm exhausted when I get home. I'm not going to take 2 hours off of work to go to a school board meeting. I'm not saying you do that because you have to go to work.
Yeah.
I'm saying for those who have the time and the opportunity, okay, you got to get involved somehow. And for those that are working, have a conversation with as many people as you can about, have you ever thought that the world is just like this and controlled by those few people? When you plant a seed like that, it sprouts. And don't just think of that seed like an acorn, like Admiral Bud has said. I said, why do you spend all this time talking with me about all this stuff? He says, well, I got about 20 people like you. I said, what? He said, yeah, 20 people that I talk to all the time. I continually ask him questions about a broad range of subjects. I mean, let's talk about airborne lasers and directed energy weapons and all that. We talked about that stuff too. And how they're used and why and the motivations and blah, blah, blah. And he'll tell me, he says, because you keep asking questions. He says, now, I don't want to be the guy that spoon feeds you. I tell you where to look, which is why he gave me the book list, right? And for those that have the time to at least listen and start thinking, he says, well, he's got 20 of me. Well, how many have I talked to? I got about the same number. I got about the same number of classmates and friends, about 20, that wouldn't be thinking the way you and I think had I not mentioned something to them, had I learned stuff from my friend and went to them. And now we've got your audience. So now look at that little acorn and imagine a forest that we've created. So shows like yours, people that participate, people that listen, people who just learn stuff. If you don't have the time, because believe me, I'm sensitive to it, that long ass work day, and you just can't get to it, it's killer, right? And you're like, dude, my wife and I are both working. Neither one of us have time. We're tired. Okay, do what you can. Can you do this? Can you take an hour a few times a week and watch something informative like a show like this so that you just know? And maybe you're one of those people who says to somebody else that's in the same position, you know what? Check out this channel on Roku called Burrow. Check out Tommy Carrigan's show. Check out The Fall of the Cabal series by Janet Alsabard. Boom, done. Don't have to leave your house. Don't have to spend a dime. I think Burrow's free on Roku. So maybe you got to buy the, I don't know. My wife sets all that stuff up. I just say, okay, to whatever she wants. And then she'll click something on and we watch it. That's the biggest thing I see. And because I've asked my bud before, I'm like, hey, dude, I've asked him 3 times. Can you commission me right now? Because you know what? When he says, we need the public to do this, and we need this, and we need this, and we need... So I grouched back to him, and I went on a long, whiny diatribe on purpose, because I wanted to see how he would react. I got emotional and was argumentative. I said, dude, you got families that just getting by. I said, groceries are barely unaffordable. Gas is more expensive than ever. And you know what there is? Dude, I said, none of us can see any leadership. Is there a recruiting office down the street? Hey, Save the Republic, sign up right here. Now, it might not necessarily need to pack up and carry gear anywhere and a primary and a secondary weapon, but we need somebody to look into these gangsters and their financial transactions and all the nefarious stuff that they do. So we'll train you. I said, there's no recruiting office. There's no leadership. There's no call for that. I said, so you guys, you want to see response? Why don't you give us some guidance and give us direction, not just sit there and say, well, we're just waiting for the public to do something. I said, you know what? We voted. Number one, you know how we voted. The military knows how we voted. We get up, we go to school board meetings. We go to the county commissioner meetings. Even for those of us, it's hard. And I told him, I said, just think of the scenario of my employees. I could, say a household, one person's making 50, one person's making 40 a year. And so they're bringing the $90,000 home to their household. Maybe they're just renting. Rent is more expensive than it's ever been. They have to buy gasoline. They have to buy groceries. They're paying other bills. And you want to tell them, we need you to be involved and read 2 hours a night and then go to all of these meetings. No. Give us some guidance and we'll do it. And he just said, well, okay. He didn't react emotionally at all. And the way I went off on that was not the way I did it on this show. I grouched. I was swearing at him. I'm like, what the fuck you want us to do? And people are just trying to get by. Come on, we're just going to break. He says, well, this is the way it's got to be. Because just like the Great Depression, which my parents and grandparents talked about, he said, you need pain. You need the pain of all of this to endure because it lasts 4 generations.
Those who suffer remember. It's one of my favorite quotes.
And here we are.
Those who suffer remember.
And that's kind of like my last message. There's a reason for the suffering. I don't like it. It does get me out there to talk and say, shh. Okay, well, you've emboldened me with this information, bro. My pal. I call him my pal, the boss, whatever. And I'm gonna tell other people, like you asked me to, those that listen. Yeah, I'm gonna take the time and go on a show during my workday because there might be a few others in your audience. You do the same with your time. And so a long answer to your question of what can we do? Do what you can. And if the minimum is what you can do, is just sacrifice some of your entertainment time, football games and beer, some of it, and learn stuff like we talked about today. Woodrow Wilson, Federal Reserve Act, Trading with the Enemy Act. Okay, just know stuff, right? It'll prove to be valuable because if you simply discuss it with somebody else, we're growing that forest. And notice how I used the oak analogy because oaks are tough. They're formidable.
And that's why I try to make it entertaining and fun. It's just I don't want, all right, I'm going to do 1 hour Tommy's podcast. I'm going to learn something. No, it's Woodrow Wilson, and then you might hear me scream slurs about Gator frameworks and how this is a shitty microphone boom company. You gotta slide in. You gotta make a spoonful of sugar helps it go down. But it's I'm in a position where I'm my own boss. I don't have a wife. I don't have kids. I don't have dependents. I'm in a very I understand that most people don't have my and I choose my work day and I understand I'm in a weird bubble. But one, I've worked very hard to get here, but two, I also do look at that as somewhat of a responsibility to where I can burn through 2-3 hours of documentaries per day. And I listen at 1x, 2x, 3x speed. I can do that. And I can do these shows. So to me, I'm like, this is what I can do. So this is what I'm doing. And make it a little more easily digestible. Maybe you don't have time to read a 30-hour Woodrow Wilson book. But I mean, you could probably grab an hour and listen to this show, just us shooting the shit. So I think you can just do the bare minimum, which is really just learn. And to me, just as like an intellectual challenge, I'm like, how do I make this interesting? How do I? That was always my, what's that quote? And we'll wrap it up with this because I know you got to run. But what was the quote? It's if you can't explain it if you can't explain it simply, if you can't explain it to a child, then you don't truly understand it. I always thought there was even one level above that, and it's if you can't make it funny, then you don't really understand it. And that's how I would always understand if I was really ready for an OChem test or like a physics test. I'd be like, I know because I'm using the analogy like whatever permeable cell membrane or active transport. It's like, all right, it's like this. There's a bouncer out front of the bar, and he's not letting in any fat chicks or dudes because there's way too much sausage in there. But he sees a dime walking down. He goes, She's coming in, but that's against the gradient. That's more than the fire marshal want. But she's hot as fuck, so they're gonna actively let her in. Like, oh, okay, yeah. You say to your buddies you're in college at UGA, you're like, yeah, I've seen that. If you can make it funny, then you really understand it. So to me, that's maybe like my little challenge. I'm like, how do I take a dense book about Woodrow Wilson? And it's a dense book and it's not very entertaining. Like, how do I flip this out? How do I tie this into something remotely entertaining? So that's my challenge. But so I did, when we were talking, I copy and pasted those emails you sent, the book list. I will put those in the description, and I'm gonna start going through these one by one. I think I've read several of them. I know I have, but I want to keep going through these shows with you because I do enjoy it. I do kind of like, it's also, it's a learning process for me too. Because you said you don't know anything about Wood. I don't know it other than the last 7 days. I don't know shit about Woodrow Wilson. So it's I think we're not learning if we're talking about shit we both know. Neither of us are learning, but I think we're, by going backwards into like 100 years ago, we're both on shaky ground, and I think that's what causes you to probably be at your best when you go, I don't entirely know this. That makes you're like, I really gotta cross the T's and dot the I's. So I'd like to kind of keep going in that direction, farther back, but I'm up to suggestions if you want to take it in a different direction.
Well, let's keep in touch after this show, and
Yeah.
and we'll come up with something.
All right.
For sure. I mean, we're yeah, I'm affiliated with the TWC. I'm going to do the small marketing plug. I
Yeah, go
think you
for
have
it.
your
Yeah.
own, your own affiliate link for TWC.health. You got a hashtag be on there because we're doing a whole bunch of these antibiotic preparation kits right now.
Oh, nice.
Let's say you got a hurricane or something that knocks out your access to a doctor. We're doing that. We're also going to launch, and we can have another show. We're launching a COVID emergency kit because it's going to come around. I mean, really, it's the lethality, what we call the infection fatality rate with COVID, is actually really low. But for the at-risk populations, or for those interested, what we know is that early treatment is crucial. It's key. And I told all my friends during COVID, I said, listen, the worst thing you can do is tell me that you're sick on a Friday afternoon, because I got to tell you to go get a consult with a telemedicine doctor. And then I got to rush around and have my staff pack a box and get it to you. And if you don't have Saturday delivery in your area, you're not getting it. So with a wellness company, I came up with an idea. So, well, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, they're really not that expensive. The meds that are used for acute COVID are pretty much the same, and they're also effective against the regular flu. Let's have an emergency kit that we'll talk about that people can have on hand, and that way they'll have a guidebook and be taught how to use it. So we can discuss that just as that keeps the business going, so that I can have my folks out there filling the stuff. But I really like talking about all these subjects. So let's you and I come up with the next agenda item, and I'll let you know whenever my bud, like I said, I call him the boss, whenever he sends me something to look into. And this is a broad range of shit, man. I mean, just last week, he's telling me about, look at all this research done by MIT and Harvard on nanodust, smart dust, and what can be done with it. Look at this. We talked about the hydrogel and the frequency delivery of a payload and what DARPA was working on. All that nefarious bioweapons shit, or, there's other topics too. Let me pull up the chat. What are some of the most
I was going
things
down the rabbit hole last night about these new declassified papers coming out about what's it called? But they're saying Star Wars, right? The SDI program. They're tracing it back to Eisenhower. They're tracing all these papers back from before DARPA was a group called the Jason Scientists. And you're probably aware because I saw in your book list, Surprise Kill Vanish, Annie Jacobson, one of her books about DARPA. Yeah, it's sorry, but yeah, no, in terms of just rabbit holes and going down, yeah, no, nano dust. I mean, I remember reading about that in Popular Mechanics back when we first invaded Iraq, talking about you just dust a little bit, leave it somewhere, leave it out, and it's like a GPS tracker, and we fucking hit them with a Hellfire missile a week later. No one understands why or how. The rabbit holes that's the other point, is like, this shit's fun. This shit shouldn't just be like, all right, do your part and learn. This stuff is fun. It's better than any movie you'll ever watch. Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'll scan through our chats just since Saturday. We talked about CO2 and the bullshit of climate change, how CO2 actually benefits vegetation growth. I mean, why do all these indoor growers buy CO2 emitters? Right. So this climate change crisis bullshit is just that. We talked about that. Another subject I told you about the nanodust. The giants. Okay, we'll get about that. That have walked the earth, and who knows.
I'm down.
And the Mariana Islands. I'll send this to you. It's as he's talked about. It's not easy. There's so many islands that are unmapped or obscured, even when we use Google Earth. And then what he does is he puts to me like the inquisitive method. He says, well, what could be there? Why would they obscure the view? We're talking about the Mariana Islands, right? I'll send you the exact same Google map link that he sent to me. And I'm like, well, what could be there? How come there aren't any boats or docks at one of these islands? Why is there a lake in the middle of one of them? He said, there you go. And he said, now, he says, here's something to assign to all your diggers out there. He thinks I have the time for this, what I'm about to tell you, but I just don't. He's like, get some of these old cartography maps and overlay on the Google Maps, and particularly pay attention to what islands you're not allowed to see.
Yeah, the 15, right? 13 Peary
right.
Rise. I can never say that name. 1513 map. Who is it? Yeah. Professor Hapgood from somewhere in New Hampshire, writing Einstein, or Admiral Hapgood, I think, writing Einstein, or vice versa.
Yeah.
About sonar mappings of Antarctica back in the 50s.
Oh yeah, we've talked about Admiral Byrd's expedition, how he got his ass kicked.
Fucking high jump. Like why? That never really gets brought up. A couple years after World War II, we just send a couple aircraft carriers down to Antarctica. That's the most batshit thing that never gets brought up. We just a
4,000 troop expeditionary force. That's not exploration. Right?
No, and by the way, this isn't because we have nothing doing. We just got out of World War II. So we're not exactly keen to just throw this shit around.
Right.
He just goes there, and then that's it. And he comes back, and he later talks about flying saw. Whatever. Don't worry about it.
They had them. They didn't have a lot of them. So it's like this analogy somebody gave me. Last thing, and I'll go.
You can say, dude, I got nothing to do. I know you're at work.
Well, you think of this. Say, well, if the Nazis really had those wonderful weapons, why didn't they beat us? Well, maybe they didn't have very many. I mean, could they test anti-gravitic technology? Sure. I asked him about this. I'm like, well, he asked me. He didn't tell me because he's not allowed. I said, well, if I wanted to test that stuff in its Second World War, and I had an anti-gravity system that could put something up into the space or whatever, I'd try it out on U-boats. I mean, they're self-contained. They got their own air and power supply. I'd say, well, let's see if we can get this shit up there and get it down.
Yeah.
And maybe we have to insulate it a little more and build some heaters. He says, He says, now you're thinking. And he says, just like Mike Tyson might be the greatest knockout expert ever. And you put him against any one single fighter, with maybe the exception of George Foreman, and he's just going to dominate when he was a killer, when he was a killing machine. But if you take 20 guys to go beat Mike Tyson down, those 20 guys are going to win. What America had at the end of the Second World War was the numerical superiority.
Defense production. We were producing more planes than every other country, Allied and Axis combined.
That's right. But what the Nazis had, maybe they had one, maybe they had four. And all they could really do on these Hanabu crafts. So look up Hanabu 1.
I know.
Okay. And all they could do is mount some freaking guns on it. But when that thing can go all over the place, you can't turn your gun fast enough to shoot at it. And he said, yep. He said, Admiral Byrd got his ass kicked. That's one of the things we've talked about. And we talked recently, two last things he said. Look up fenbendazole. There's a lot of people looking into drugs similar to ivermectin for things far more reaching than just viral diseases or parasites. Fenbendazole, which is only approved for use in animals, but he said, look it up for its treatment of human cancers. Joe Tippins and the Tippins protocol, solid tumor cancers, not bloodborne cancers. And also he says, well, look at what's going on here. He said, pretty soon you may see drugs like NyQuil, Sudafed, ibuprofen, all get pulled off, Benadryl, all getting pulled from the pharmacy shelves. Yeah. He said, they're all going to get pulled from the shelves right as we go into flu and cold season. What is that going to make people do? He says, well, I'm sure the drug industry is going to have answers for that stuff. He says, so just be aware, dude. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll put together a flu kit as long as I can, for the time I'm able to buy stuff. So but this is the broad range of topics that we that we talk about. So you can pick anything within that spectrum or something new, and let's hook up
Dude,
for another
let's
show.
I'm down. I'm down for literally all of it. But no, that's the one thing is you go, well, if the Nazis were so advanced, why'd they lose? They didn't have numbers. Well, what better way to win than go if you're split the difference? Half,
Right.
2/3 come to the United States, 1/3 go to the Soviet Union. You can go infect both these giant powerhouses. So they have the production capability. You got the technology. If I was and if I'm as smart as I'm, hypothesizing them to be, I would look at all of this and I'd go, all right, we wanted to win. We wanted to set up our German thing, but I think it's more viable. Yeah, just say we lost, and then we'll go to both these countries, and it will take some time, but you'll take over. You'll have their production capability, and everyone will think that you lost. You're dead now.
Right.
Faked your death essentially. Hitler
Hey,
did it. It's
US.
the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, US, we're going to use you to rule the world militarily, right? And not even the Nazis, like who's above them, right? But the Nazis are the Khazarians and, the enemy that we face. Yeah, we got to keep you guys enemies, Russia, United States. We're going to trick both populations because the last thing we want is for you guys to team up together again, like you did to fight the Brits. You could get rid of us too. So we don't want that. We're going to keep you enemies. And we're going to rob both of your countries. And yeah, like I said, all those military bases across the world. But there had to be an underground effort, I think, that Eisenhower put into motion. And probably were ready to come out during the Kennedy. I'm talking good guys on our side. Were ready to come out during the Kennedy administration, but they probably had to go deeper underground when they assassinated him. But there's a counter. I just feel it. I just feel that there's got to be a counter. And what did the military industrial complex do to the Christians that were good guys? They got rid of Patton. Well, I mean, was it an accident in their favor?
No, they
right. They killed him. They got rid of Eisenhower. There's some rumor that MacArthur had some problems, but MacArthur had love of country. He had issues. They got rid of the Christian old men, and those guys crowed about it on their way out. I said, "Hey, I've got no power," and MacArthur knew they were getting pushed out, so that this military control of the military wing of Washington D.C. could be in control of the world.
Yeah, I like to think that Eisenhower set something in motion. That guy wasn't stupid.
And Kennedy propelled it. And I think that in the relatively short period of time, I think we are going to know. I think the enemy realized they did have somebody solid on the other line when Hillary did not win. All they had to do was unrig.
That's what I always look back to. Yeah. That's my evidence for there's some sort of competent counter. You could always say there's a counter. I could say you and I are counters. We're doing our part, but you and I aren't exactly bringing down the CIA. Noted. But I always point to as like a competent counter. I'm like,
all they had to do was unrig 16 counties.
If they're so omnipotent, how the fuck did they let Trump in?
They didn't. All they had to do was unrig 16 counties. That's why she was so pissed. That's why she was so shocked and surprised. All that it wasn't because the polling was wrong. No.
The internal people told her, "No, you're gonna win. No, we got it.
We got it fixed."
They were like, "We don't know what the fuck happened.
What the fuck happened?" And we can't challenge it because the machines work like they're supposed to in a legit election. They were unrigged. We can't go cry about that shit. And it's like that's when the enemy realized, okay, there's a shark on the other end of the line. Now we're at war.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
That's why it seems like everything's just gone off the fucking rails since 2016.
Yeah.
They thought they thought they were the only game in town. And what would you do? Challenge. If you're an effective counter, what would you do? You'd have to bide your time. You'd have to, even if that meant decades, because you'd only have one shot, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. And I think,
all right, Tommy, I got to run.
We'll wrap it up. No, dude, great episode. I'll text you. Let's schedule another one. I fucking love talking to you, man. I love, hell yeah, that's perfect.
All right.
I love this.
All
shit.
right.
All
You
right,
got
dude.
it.
Thank you so much for coming
Thank your
on.
audience for me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Please go in the description. You can find a link to all the, or not a link, a list of all the books. You can find a link to the Wellness Company, his profile, all that good stuff. Dr. Seik, thank you so much.